When it comes to Trump and Ukraine, at least there's one thing we know for sure. Democrats are already doing more to push back than they've done after any other Trump scandal. Now, as House Speaker Nancy Pelosi made clear yesterday, Democrats, they're prepared to use their ultimate power. Of course, I'm talking impeachment. And we have some other idea how the process will work, at least right now. 6 House committees, they're going to continue their investigations, only now using new powers available through impeachment. They will then forward their best findings to Judiciary Committee. Judiciary will then consider and vote on articles that they feel merit impeachment. A majority of the committee would be needed. If that happens, then the full House will vote. If a majority approves the articles, then the president is impeached. I should note that's something that's only happened twice before. Then a trial is held in the Senate. If 67 senators find the president guilty, he's removed from office. That is unprecedented. If not, Trump continues to serve as president. So that's how the process works. But there certainly is a split in how Democrats ought to approach the process. That split best exemplified by the recommendations of 2 well-known Democratic presidential advisors, James Carville and Dan Pfeiffer. Carville, he wants a very narrow scope. 1 impeachment article on Ukraine, approve it, then put pressure on the Senate, including 5 Republicans considered vulnerable in next year's elections. Pfeiffer, he wants a much wider scope and a well-managed process, saying Democrats, they need a concise message to sell. The process be easily digestible and feel like a TV show. Use impeachment's unpopularity as a selling point, that it's a principled stand, not a popular one, and treat Republicans in the Senate as a foil. Ask why they have not acted to protect the nation, and continue a full legislative agenda so they can show they can govern while they impeach, walk and chew gum. So the question is, which path ought Democrats follow? For that, let's turn to Roger Fisk. Roger, he's a Democratic strategist who served in the Obama administration from 2009 to 2017. He was a senior aide to Senator John Kerry as well. Roger, I appreciate the time as always.
Hey, Richard, thanks so much.
So they seem full in. They're not dipping the toe in. Obviously, Speaker Pelosi wouldn't have done what she did unless she knows she's got the votes for this. That said, I gave you 2 recommendations. What course do you think they ought to follow?
I, despite being an Obama guy, have to agree with the Clinton guy of your 2 examples, which is one of the problems with the Mueller report and some of the other situations that have confronted the president is they've been somewhat vague, somewhat complex. The emoluments clause, for example, leaves people a little underwhelmed, whereas this situation is bite-sized. It's easy to digest. The president and his lawyer have already copped to much of it, so it's not necessarily a question of taking a year or 2 to find out what's going on. So sitting here now, knowing what I know, I would really go for the much more surgical, much more kind of sober, kind of targeted avenue of attack on this. I understand Dan, he's a good friend of mine, but I just don't think we can afford a wide narrative, because the wider the narrative and the broader the narrative, the more room that is for the president to play mischief and to try to divide up different wings of the Democratic Party. So I think the simpler narrative is the better one.
Did Speaker Pelosi make the right call politically? Forget about morally, ethically, even for the betterment of the nation, just from a pure, raw political sense. You know how impeachment polls, about 1/3 of the country support the idea. Obviously, the balance otherwise. Is she right to go ahead, and will she regret it next fall?
I hope and I trust that she is actually doing this within the context of her constitutional responsibilities. I try to share this with various audiences, that this isn't something that Democrats get up in the morning and, are thrilled to have happening in this country. It's a sad and sober day when the machinery of impeachment gets put in motion. So I can't think that she's sitting there saying, like, this is what we need to do to help us next fall, because it is setting in motion a long series of many, many circumstances and many, many dynamics that will play out regionally, socioeconomically, politically, play out different points on the calendar as we move forward, especially as people actually start to vote in the caucuses and primaries next year. So I can only think and hope that she's trying to execute her responsibilities in a constitutional context, because I don't think anyone could look at this and politically say that they really know where it's going to end.
To that end, it's interesting you bringing that up because I remembered in the impeachment proceedings when we're talking with Clinton, one of the things that struck me was how many people were bothered that they thought at the time the Republicans were enjoying this. Whether they overreached or not, people reached their own conclusions, but there was a tone that, hey, we got him, you know? How does she manage to herd cats here and keep everybody on message to what you just said? This isn't something, you know, to be doing cartwheels over. I mean, this is not a good look for our country to have to go this route, even if it's the necessary move. The optics of this are very important, that this is something I think the Democrats ought to make clear that they're doing soberly and not, you know, something that, hey, this is going to score us some seats here come next fall.
Sure. I think there's a couple layers to the answer. One is she's going to need very strict discipline from the relevant half dozen committee chairs. So I think with some exceptions, probably Congressman Schiff being one, she will ask the committee chairs to adopt kind of the Richie Neal approach, which is, if you've noticed, he's the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. He is sitting on the constitutional powers to access the president's tax returns, but you don't see him on the Sunday shows. You don't hear him on drive time radio. So I think she's going to be looking for that model from the committee chairs. The flip side of that coin is that she knows that there's about 35 incumbent Democrat members of the House who are going to be running in districts that either Trump won or Trump came close in. And I think so in that context, she needs to give kind of a decentralized blessing so that they can go out and defend themselves and make the case that they need to in their district, because I think a one-size-fits-all kind of messaging operation from D.C. and from the leadership down is not necessarily going to do the job that some of those potentially purple Democrats might be facing in terms of re-election chances.
In terms of timeline, Roger, do they almost have to wrap this thing up by spring no matter what?
Ideally, yes, although there's any number of things that could slow it down. For example, how quickly evidence is produced and things like that.
It will be fascinating to watch. Roger, I appreciate the time as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. It's always a pleasure.
All right, everybody, when we come back, he went from being completely unknown in the U.S. to the center of the impeachment storm. So what do we know about the pressures being brought to bear on the Ukrainian new president? He got Putin to his east. He's got Trump to his west. We're going to chat with an expert on the Ukraine. That coming up next.